Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Hawaii. October 21st, 2021. This is part 3 in a new series of podcasts, live streams, spontaneous sharings. A Maverick's guide, a Maverick's masterclass, flawed and beautiful, unique to you, a Maverick's masterclass on the creative process as I see it, that combines, for me, world Dhamma, consciousness and context, creatively engaging the confluence of existence inside and outside for the purpose of overcoming impurities, defilements, idiocies, and evolving beautiful states of mind and context to life, to people, to the future of freedom. In today's sharing, part 3, I wanted to add forsaking tradition, forsaking familiarity, but I left that out. Creating an atmosphere of intuition and feeling. I don't think I could emphasize personally enough the power and the sanctity of inhabiting interiority. I use that to describe the action of meditation. For me personally, the action of yoga, the Dharma artistry, the asana of transformational authenticity. Inhabiting interiority. I want to use the word carefully here with elegance, because we often unknowingly project an imaging within the concept texture of elegance that is often disparate, different, negatively comparative to our own lack of elegance. And here I use the word interiority, a respect for one's authentic, evolving elegance. Call it that cognitive atmosphere called consciousness in confluence with psychology, conditions, events, memories, feelings, intuitions, instincts, subconsciousness and pre-consciousness, way down deep and around and in and through everything. That oceanic river stream of whatever we're embedded in that flows through us, in us, around us. That atmosphere, the sanctity of empowering, I want to use the word a respect, a holiness, a sacredness to that atmosphere. That to me is today's sharing, and how well do we consecrate that as a regular endeavor, a practice, a ritual. Now, just setting the stage today, taking my time, just on a personal sharing, so much of creativity for me is about the, how should I put it, the innate purity of self-honesty. Not a comparative honesty to what others do and don't do, but authenticity informed by self-honesty that is always in an evolutional correction enhancement dance with self and sub-selves and conditions and events, and that ever-present tapestry of impermanence. Self-honesty, that in itself is such a deliberate act of creative engagement to be in high radiance, if you will, with that virtue, and I do think it's a radical virtue, not just honesty and truthfulness, but self-honesty, that self-accountability, that ability to be dangerous to your own so-called peace of mind, your own sanctity, and deliberately infiltrate inner beingness and behaviors and the uprising of conditions and kiss, touch, play, be your own psychiatrist, your own coach, your own shamanist, and is this true? Why do I feel it to be true? Can it be evolved and enhanced to be something larger than the way I see it today in truth? Self-honesty as a creative act of the evolution of authenticity. And so it's overcoming cliche and forsaking the tradition of familiarity and the risk to inhabit a more cohesive, catalyzing intelligence, if you will, that's willing to deal more uncomfortably, comfortably with ambiguity, with peculiarity, with complexity, and knows. I remember once seeing a documentary on the late Stephen Hawking, the great astrophysicist, and his mother was asked, what was it like growing up with the world's foremost intellectual? And he said, it just, paraphrasing, essentially saying it was insane. The man, the boy, the teenager, just filled with prolific thought. And his genius, as his mom said it, was that within the uprising of crazy experimental visions and expressions, he could pick out from within that nuggets. And that's what I'm saying today about the deliberate creation of atmospheres, formations of energy, taking it off the physics realm of language and waves and particles and frequencies, yes, but more of the formation of constructs to allow us to inhabit language. Because everything that's ever creative is already present in some form or another, because we're just drawing down in and around and through information and coordinating that information through past memory, thought, speech, action, smell, taste, hope, fantasy, despair. And wow, the dexterity of intelligences, the dexterity of intelligence to create this atmosphere, if you will, of intuition and feeling and Hawking-esque like knowing, I will take from that atmosphere the hue of blue within the spectrum of whatever it is that's in your rainbow. And so you take the color blue and you put it on the palette of consciousness, you anoint it with the brush of mindful intelligence, and you play upon the screen of one's own perception an idea, and all of a sudden that idea becomes, a phrase. And the importance for me, just sharing a personal point here, the importance for me of documenting the evidence of one's own awakening and one's own liberation. Get in the habit, if you want to be an artist, I feel, my humble opinion, be willing to retranslate inspiration from within and anoint your walls, not just notebooks, but your walls, with the evidence of your own research. So a compendium, if you will, of radical prose and phrases and ideas that you can draw from and go, put this together with this word, with this idea, with this phrase, and all of a sudden you have sacred lines called something to do with a poem that's emerging from your soul, and you go, it's a process of creativity. That's what I'm pointing to here, creating an atmosphere of intuition and feeling. And last night I was sitting here in my little temple, and I was dosing, to be very transparent with you, and listening to my mind, writing, thinking, feeling, meditating, doing a minute here and there of yoga. And then I turned on an album by Nick Cave called Ghosteen. You may know it. I think it came out in 2019. And it's an hour and 12 minutes of, it's not music alone, it's an hour and 12-minute long prayer. Because, as it turns out, Nick Cave and his wife lost their 15-year-old son some years back to a tragic accident where he fell from a cliff near their home, apparently in England. And as I learned more about that event and began to feel the prose and the poetry and the synthesizers of Warren Ellis, clearly his creative soulmate, the two of them together are really quite an event of beauty for me. And I was listening to the last song specifically. I think the title of it is Hollywood. It's a long song. And Cave and Ellis do lyrical videos rather than visual videos with their music. So you can see the language appear on the screen. And there's something beautiful about that. And I'm reading it, and I'm listening, and I'm feeling, and all of a sudden I begin to recognize a story Nick is sharing in this particular cut on the album Ghosteen, which really dives into the anguish and the despair of losing his son. And he refers to a story within the Buddhist tradition of Kisa Gotama, a story I've known so long and so well and heard so many times, but I didn't anticipate that he'd be poetically singing and crying this parable of how this woman, Kisa Gotama, lost her son and was in despair, like Nick here losing his son. And she went to the Buddha and asked for advice on how to bring back to life. It's so poetic, so revolutionary, so poignant, so tragic. Bring back to life my son. And it said that the Buddha said to the woman, Kisa Gotama, and as Nick is singing it here in Ghosteen on this last song called Hollywood, find a mustard seed and bring it to me, of a home where there has never been death, and I will bring back to life your beloved son. Quite a artistic, creative, dharmically provocative exchange, right? The artistry of that, the creativity of that, the risk of that, the innate purity of self-honesty to reveal your anguish and to be humble enough to ask for the inexplicable, to bring back to life something that's never been brought back to life. And yet the poetry of that exchange is something so beautiful about that Tantra. And mustard seed after mustard seed she did not gather, because home by home, no one could say, we have not lost someone. And Nick goes on in the song, everybody has lost someone. Everybody has lost someone. And what a long distance to go from the travesty of death like that with a beloved to the existential altar of peace and recognition that everything is in impermanent flux. Nothing could be sustained. Creating an atmosphere of intuition and feeling that relaxes more and more into the innate mortality of every nuance of every moment of existence. And there, in that vulnerability, right, we relax the tradition of dogma, of propaganda, of misinformation. And I do use the word carefully here, I'm going to get into it. The misinformation, spiritual misinformation, Dharma misinformation, existential misinformation, the deliberate manipulation of ultimate realities that contort those realities to configure to someone's need over truth. And art, to me, is, for me personally, the abandonment over and over and deeper of reward by being true to yourself, by daring to be real, to authenticate as an evolutional act of our meditative mindfulness. And I share that story because it brought tears to my eyes of joy and poignancy and tragedy. And I took the time through the filter of my dose and memory and feelings and creativity and just read some of the comments. And there were a multitude of comments on this exquisite album given freely called Ghosting. And one of the things that really struck me was how frequently in the comments the resonant intimacy was how that person too had lost someone they loved just recently. And I couldn't believe the range of ages, from infants to young children, to teenagers, to an elder mother, to a grandparent, to a friend, to an uncle, to my husband. I cannot tell you how many texts and emails I've gotten from people over the 7 months since my own personal diagnoses of an acutely enlarged aortic aneurysm and the perception of mortality, and now being in hospice here on Maui. Everyone is living and breathing in this type of terminal creative possibility. And what will you do by taking a risk, if you will, within the complexity to create your hymn, your music, your book, your poem, your artistry, to dance on this stage that cannot hold us for long, with the delight of refusing to participate in the narrative of fear, greed, delusion, as much as humanly possible. Art as lifestyle. Creating an atmosphere of intuition and feeling. So, the innate purity of self-honesty, the daring to be true, the daring to be you. Yesterday I spoke a little bit about being in a monastery and how easy one could assume that you're now living in radical conformity to an ancient tradition, 2,600 plus years, within a particular sect of those ancient teachings, behaving as a nun, and in my case, a monk, shaven head, wearing the robes, foregoing deliberate acts of intimate sexuality, both physically and verbally, renouncing money, food, storage. You abandon things to abide in the sanctity of being gifted by voluntary donations and support to the monastery to support you medically and physically and emotionally, and to shelter you and to provide robes when needed, to be able to abide in this sacred texture. How to create that sacred texture is part 3 of this Mavericks class, without being so-called in that special place, but creating that special place through a deliberate, ongoing act of creative engagement that respects interiority and the atmosphere of one's own inner beingness, to promote intuitive sense and wisdom and more dimensional feelings. And in that monastery, I began to see over the months and the few years that I spent there in and out of different monasteries, but specifically the monastery in Yangon, Burma, the diversity, the utter uniqueness of every individual. You go to the meditation hall and you see 300, 400, 500 monks and sitting pretty much all in the same way, shaven heads, wearing the robes, cross-legged, still, eyes closed, doing a specific Buddhist-oriented, Satipatthana-based mindfulness meditative technique. And yet, when you meditate, you begin to see, and when you begin to hear other meditators share their inner experience to their teachers, no two are alike. Pain exists in all bodies, but how we experience that is an infinite spectrum of sensation and perception. And for me, art, coming right down to novelty, creativity, originality, and getting down deeper into the improvisational spontaneity of originality, that intuition, that deeper sense of trust in the uniqueness of your own expression, how you want to say it, how you want to put those words together. Oh my God. Oh my, got to break every form of syntax, reorganize syllables to be grammatically imperfectly correct, incorrect, right, because it's anti-woke. It's really, anti-McWokeism. It is so other than the way often it would be applauded by mediocrity. And to trust in that uniqueness, that's what my point is. And context, it's another thing about the monastery, is that within that context, knowing how to create a suitable environment for yourself, not just inner environments, but a physical heart art, theater studio, sacred closet even if you need, or even if it is in an urban setting on some 37th floor of a building in some urban setting anywhere in the world, or a basement somewhere down deep in the earth in a high-rise in Berlin, where there's a young teenager there with her headphones on and that little saved every penny I could and bled my parents and friends to buy that synthesizer, and there she is just tuning in and tuning out, created a high sonic, high fidelity context to be able to hear herself. So on the one hand, monasteries, and there are a lot of animals, there are a lot of dogs, there's sometimes a lot of cars, there are those who smoke cigarettes, there are those who smoke cigars. I was one of them for a while. They can be busy and noisy, and you go like, what in the hell? Isn't meditation designed to be only successful when it's silent? So, having ideal conditions are primarily an interior job. And it's an attitude to consecrate whatever we do have available. I do believe wherever you are, you can be in your own studio if you so choose to develop the sonic barriers to keep out, to keep in, to optimize that creation of an atmosphere that promotes, I would call it, the radicalization of intuition and emotionality. Because so many people are creative and talented and smart, started their books, started their poems, started their films, started their, but they're not disciplined, or they don't seem to study the attributes, if you will, of creative environments to be able to optimize that more intrinsic urge to stay with it and delight in it, because it's not work. I mean, you give up everything pretty much to follow your heart in this world. Kisa Gautama could not find a mustard seed, came to the Buddha. And she understood. Everybody's lost someone. Everybody's lost someone. Equal to that, which I'm not going to go into that at the moment, is that boy, your wife, your husband, your father, your mother, your lover. We're in the poetry of rebirthing. Death is an illusion. Discontinuity of certain things, yes. Death as an illusion. Limitation as an illusion. We play within the context of complexity, but you keep on pushing on, and how to create this sacred contexts in order to inspire those deeper expressions of soul and music and rock and roll and electronica and whatever it is inside of you, the genres that you mix. I know living in Paris, for example, back in the mid-1990s, I often went to Notre Dame. I just lived a couple of blocks from Notre Dame. I happened to study cathedrals and cathedral art and Renaissance art when I was in college. And I would go into Notre Dame and meditate, pray, feel, walk, bring in my notebook. And the sanctity of that creation for me, perhaps a lot of it was projection, but there was something in the reflection of the stained glass and the height, the buttresses, and the quietude and the sanctity that took me into something very unique and special. And each of us have our Notre Dame. Notre Dame isn't just Notre Dame. I've purposely gone to brothels. I've gone to sex clubs to simply be in my own Henry Miller, Anais Nin moment, to create within a radical context. I've been in war zones, in refugee camps, in places of displaced people, to feel and to anoint the atmosphere with a provocation, to release unrealized intuitions. They're there. How many people I have seen living their normal day-to-day lives in their various settings in various places around the world and come to me for various reasons about complexity and struggle and how to evolve their interior in context. And I would constantly just simply refer to them, have you ever done a meditation retreat? And they would say, no, what is that? It's a Notre Dame, where we can consciously evolve our inner atmospheres to provide optimal release of those seeds of enormous possibility called intuitions, epiphanies. And a seed, as you know, contains a universe. You see everything that grows came from this seed, a sequoia, a rose, an apple, a papaya, vegetables, everything born from these intuitions, these existential, cosmic, existential seeds. And so much is directed towards outcome in art, in meditation, in spirituality. I want to get enlightened. I want to get a best-selling book. I want a book contract. I want a really great literary agent. I want. But you don't have the followers. You don't have the viewers. You want all the duress and the fatigue of the simple beauty of listening to create a self-honest masterpiece of imperfection. So be very watchful of inner atmospheres and how to begin to design a sacred context to support the emergence of a more inspired expression of that which you aspire to bring forth, whether it simply be to anoint one's inner being with a more radicalized sense of identity. Many people create and influence interiority today with microdosing. You could analogously microdose meditation, microdose yoga. You could microdose walking. You could microdose taking your clothes off and microdose dancing. You could do anything possible to. Micro here is a synonym with enhancing luminosity, opening the portals of perception to see and to think and to smell and to taste and feel. Praise the beauty of sensitivity and stealth, the stealth of wisdom. I love wisdom as power over quantity or numbers. How many times I've been in friends' homes over the decades to be in their spare room or be in their living room, on their sofa, being in their basement. I know during my time in Yugoslavia, during the war, most of us would only go out at night into these underground night, deep, dark night of the soul clubs. Some of the most treasured moments of my life, to be in these horrifying sacred contexts. And my coterie of friends were writers and poets and soldiers and young artists. And we would hang. And I would bring my notebook with me. I was there to write a film on what is love in the time of genocide. And so I went to that context purposely to be there based on the good graces of my friend, Marcia Jacobs, who worked for the United Nations at that time. Otherwise, you couldn't get in. And I would go there, we would hang out and do ecstasy, smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol, dance, but feel. What I'm saying here is, where do you optimize your feeling environment? It takes risks to go towards that dream. I think of the context of 9 to 5 and the terror of that level of repetition, the terror. I just came from a time in Los Angeles, and rare would I drive, but sometimes I did drive because of the hospitalization issues. And the freeways, it's like terrifying on some cellular level that this is life. I think of my reading of biographies of the famous poet René Rilke, and how his parents lost their young child. And they dressed him up as a girl to remind them of what was missing. And he didn't know. And the father revolted at a certain point and said, I don't want this effeminate boy in this house, and put him into the most radical military school at the time, in preparation for war. And it said in his biography how bullied he was by these other macro monster conditioned boys because he was effeminate. And it said that he would go into a secret place behind walls and take a candle, and there, from within that sacred atmosphere, that he created an optimal environment for intuition and feeling to emerge. And it said that the first few lines of his poetic life became realized, I only want to be with those who know the secret things, or alone in life. It's one thing to have a studio perfectly outfitted with the best recording equipment, with a team of people to produce your studio album, your film, your book, to have high talented editors to support you. It's rare, really rare. And so some choose sacred environments and others must follow that deep, compelling instinct to hear oneself more carefully behind the walls of verbal and physical abuse, to emerge into the sanctity of an expression. I know Aung San Suu Kyi told me once, when we were talking at her home in 1995, after her first release from 6 years of incarceration, we were talking about hope. And she said there was a very influential story that she read of a young Iranian girl who was born blind, and the family did not want a girl, much less a blind child. And the father abused this child, and repeatedly, out of his own conditioning and fear, made the statement that I wish you were dead. A very severe statement. And Aung San Suu Kyi was telling me this story in brief, and how a friend of the family began to see what was happening, and yet out of cultural respect and emotional resilience and intelligence, skillfully navigated the family dynamic, and over a long period of time spoke skillfully at times with the child, and reaffirmed in this young girl's heart that you're not alone, you're a beautiful mind. You too can achieve greatness. You too are loved, whatever the words were. And this young girl went on to become the first graduate, as I was told by Aung San Suu Kyi, of Iran or Tehran University, and went on to write a book about her life and her emergence as a writer, an artist, a visionary, an expression of hope. And sometimes all it takes is that one person who believes in you, who not as your muse, but just knows how to enter your soul in such a way to bring forth, like Nick Cave's final song on Ghosteen, he and his creative soulmate, Warren Ellis, this masterpiece, this sonic prayer to release the anguish of despair, where Nick apparently is just communicating in these poetic prose the desire for rage and outrage. And Kisa Gautama can imagine the anguish of losing this child. You have felt that, I know. We all will feel that with those we love. And within that, art to me is the salvation of possibility within the darkness. The Bible is a prayer of art. The Tipitaka is a prayer of transformational art. The suttas contain on those written words handed down for centuries by the verbal acuity of nuns and monks and women and men and boys and girls who spoke about the fidelity of these teachings because they inhaled them. They dosed them and anointed their interior atmospheres with intuition and feelings that life is more than just the tradition of birth, aging, and death. They kept alive infinite possibility. Dhamma to me is infinite possibility. Freedom is the radiance of wonderment. The freedom to dream. It's not an outcome alone, it's a journey along that very strange atmosphere. And we create monastic environments like I had in Burma, where there is some form of orthodoxy. I live in a suburb, I live on an island, I live in a manufacturing chain, I live with digital needs, I live with electrification, I live with climate change, all of which is high, incredible, intense torment. The earth and civilization right now is screaming, humanoids, Homo sapiens, halt your march to self-annihilation. We are all those boys and girls in the basement in Berlin trying to bring forth a new music, a new genre, something to do with listening to our own intuition and feeling. It's a cry of the soul, isn't it, to be an artist? Art and Dharma, art and meditation, art and yoga. No two of us will do the same asana in the same way. Authenticity, for one, to state the obvious, it's so easily disguised, is not the same for someone else. Mimicry is anathema to the creative mind. How many people I know have their books written for them? How many bestsellers have ghost writers? I mean, really, and even their publishers and agents don't know about it. Mimicry, that compulsion in the human psyche to want to belong to the cult of success on the terms of even selling one's own soul. The idea of using, I watch Joseph Biden and Donald Trump and other people who are in positions of power use a teleprompter. And you just see them skillfully going from one side to the other in this eloquent words that have no relationship to their own mind and intelligence and psyche. And they're stumbling and they're going down rabbit holes, and then they're trying to anoint the teleprompted information with an emotion that corresponds to what they're being told to puppet. I mean, my God. I mean, yes, they're great musicians who do cover songs of great songs, but there comes a point where you abandon, the memorization of other. And to me, art is originality, creativity. There's no two traumas alike. There is no recipe for uncovering the wisdom of the wound. I'm so anti-Tantra, at the same time Tantra as the authentication of integrity on the terms of originality, in rhythm with 1, 2, or 3, or 4, whatever your preferences are, by being in kind of tandem agreement with flow and energy and voice and sound and touch and smell and kiss and feel and hands and heart and arms and body, all the various things that we do to interrelate in that Tantra field of original love-making expression of heart art, Dharma. Go there. What's your unique gift? Poetry means simply you taking heart to create atmospheres, to optimize intuition and feeling, and deliberately creating forms where you begin to take it out of the mind and you put it on the walls of your home, your flat, your car. I'm a real irreverent type. I say take down the images of others. Take down the iconography of India. There's so much India in Indiana. There's so much India in Iowa. So many Buddha statues. So they're on lawns everywhere on this island. And they're not even Buddhists. And they almost have no real relationship to what it even symbolizes. It means be true to yourself. It'd be better almost to put images of your own face to reflect back to you what you see and don't see. Look in the mirror on a dose of psilocybin and ask yourself, how true am I to myself? Where am I folded? And pause and listen and reflect and look at your eye movements. How are you hiding? How have you deceived your beauty? How are you contorting? What are you doing to mimic the image that you're not? Come out of those puzzle folds and be the muse of vulnerable, intuitive originality. Said it for decades, I'll say it again. No two of us will kiss alike, hold hands alike, touch alike, write alike, speak alike. In the monastery, no two beings meditate alike. That is over the top. No two have the same insights in the same way. And I'm going to close today and leave it at that, just in this free flow to talk about art as lifestyle from yesterday and a little bit of an evolution of that today, point 3. The deliberate creation of atmospheres to release those seeds of intuition and feeling, and taking the evidence of our interior research and begin to create color schemes, phrases, words, vocabularies, ideas, and put them in books, put them on walls, take down the iconography of other, and just create an art studio. I'm not saying a meditation studio or a yoga studio in your home. Enough Patanjali, enough Jesus, enough Buddha. Put up your Mary Magdalene. Who are you, woman? Put up 10,000 portraits. I'll close here. I met a young man in Bagan, the ancient city of Pagan in Burma, the ancient capital. And those who've been there know it is unthinkably sacred. And I hired this young fellow, a tour guide, with his horse cart, and we spent the day going from these 10th and 11th and 12th century temples. One by one, he would point out to me the meaning of this Buddha statue, the meaning of this when it was built, and this all day long. I was enthralled with his capacity to know so much and to do it again and again with people who would come through as a guide. And I went home with him because he invited me to meet his parents. And I had asked him if I could take a picture of him and one for me, and I would send him one, and he said no. And then reluctantly, his parents took me into his room to show me that he had so many pictures that had been sent to him. His whole wall in his little hut were filled with Polaroids at that time of pictures of himself from a very young age, where he began guiding in Pagan to take people to these temples, to the age when I met him when he was 13 or 14. He had a few hundred portraits on his walls. And he made the comment, and his parents supported it, that he keeps them up to see that he's a different person all the time. In the evolution, he's sculpting his Dhamma, his artistry, the evolution of his intuition, to stay fresh and new in the vitality of being an original mind, an original identity. He took the 9 to 5 out of his work. So from my heart to yours, thank you for being in my life. Thank you for tuning into this series. God bless. Have a beautiful day. God willing, see you tomorrow, 9:30 here from Sacred Maui for part 4 in this series, a Maverick's masterclass on my understanding of the creative process in my own life. Thank you.